everyone, and welcome to today's webcast. We'll get started in just a minute. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast, Legal Job Searching During a Crisis. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. All of your lines have been muted to reduce background noise, but please feel free to shoot us questions throughout the presentation using the questions feature that should be on the bottom right-hand side of all of your screens. Today's presentation will be recorded, so if you have to step away from your desk, don't worry, we'll send out the full recording after the conclusion of the live broadcast. I see a few people are still joining, but we want to be mindful of everyone's time. I know you've all set aside a full hour for us, and we very much appreciate that. So let's get started. We've got a couple of great experts here to talk to you today. Let's start with Lisa Lemke. Lisa?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, Job Searching During a Global Crisis. It was great to see some new and familiar names on the registration list. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lisa Lemke, the Executive Director of Legility in Atlanta, and also our National Director of Talent. So I manage our legal recruiters across our 11 offices as well. And sitting virtually by my side today is my Atlanta-based colleague, Kimberly Lerman, and she is a talent manager, what we call recruiters at Legility, and she is one of our best. I know some of you may have seen our presentation last year that we gave together, landing the in-house job of your dreams. And as I thought about pulling this together, I thought to myself, who could have predicted that we were all literally so close to landing in-house for such a protracted period of time as a result of this pandemic? When we last addressed you, national unemployment was at 3.5%, and the legal hiring market was exceptionally strong. Today, national unemployment is estimated to be around 16%, and some experts predict unemployment will eventually rival numbers we haven't seen since the Great Depression. Many of our clients have instituted hiring freezes for full-time employees until the effects of the virus on business impact become more clear. With parts of the country still in shelter-in-place mode, and even in states where rules are relaxing, business is anything but usual, and your approach to a job search in these times won't be either. The tried and true approaches of in-person networking and in-person interviewing just aren't possible right now, but there are definitely still ways you can focus on your job search and advance it during this time of uncertainty. I realize we might all be a little bit distracted from our professional development right now, given a lot of the additional responsibilities we find ourselves bearing both at work and at home. For me personally, it's been difficult to be a productive employee, a full-time parent and wife, a chef, or let's be honest, in my case, we'll just call me a cook, and a housekeeper and a teacher to my 2 children. I feel like I'm running either a boarding school or bed and breakfast, and it is absolutely exhausting. But it is still important for us to keep our eye on the ball of professional development. We will emerge from this crisis, and if you have been contemplating a career move, or are currently in transition, or suspect a layoff at your company is forthcoming, you will want to have laid the groundwork to move forward. It is understandable to feel discouraged or that your efforts may be futile, but in reality, there is still a lot that you can do to advance your job search even now. And we are going to share some of those tips and suggestions with you today. But first, a quick note for those of you who are still employed but fear layoffs may be coming at your organization. Regardless of how many signs that you see that your job is headed for elimination, it is very important to keep going about business as usual at work. Even though your current performance is not likely to change the decision that is being made based on purely economic factors, it will still go a long way towards helping your personal brand, a subject that we will dive into later. This is not just important for your references from your current employer, but it's also important for your professional reputation in general. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly to get started about how she should begin this process of a job search.
Yes. And we also included a few introductory slides about our company. Don't want to take the time to talk about those, but certainly if any of you all do have any questions about us, feel free to reach out and we can answer those questions for you. In terms of first steps, I would say if you do become a victim of downsizing, then I think the very first thing to do is to file for unemployment insurance benefits, because it can take some time for those to start coming in. And then once that administrative step is done, I would recommend you start off by taking advantage of your newfound free time to start to reflect a bit on what you've done thus far in your career and what you would like to do going forward. As part of my job as a recruiter, I talk to lawyers every day about their careers. And many of them, especially the ones who've had lengthy careers in-house, were the subject to a layoff at some point. And often they wind up telling me that in hindsight, the layoff was the best thing that ever could have happened to them professionally, because it led to a change in their career trajectory that probably would not have happened otherwise. And so I recommend spending some time now thinking about what you've liked the most and disliked the most in your past jobs, and consider what type of roles are likely to include more of those things you like and less of those you dislike. And I always recommend when you're doing that, that you think long term. Think about where you want to be at the end of your career. Whether the end of your career is expected to be in 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years, if you think about where you want to end up, then you can come up with a plan to work backwards to get there. For instance, if your ultimate goal is to become a GC of a publicly traded company, then you can use your time now to research what types of skills and experiences are needed to get there. You can look at some of the job postings for GC positions and look at what they are requiring in terms of skills and experience. And then you can think about the gaps you currently have in your own skill set and experience, and focus on seeking opportunities that are going to allow you to fill in those gaps so that you have the best chance of ending your career where you want to. So I would say if there is a silver lining to being unemployed, it's that it's going to have some time available that you'll be able to use to reflect on your professional path. And now our next topic is networking, which Lisa is going to talk about. We certainly all know how important networking is, but it's a little bit different to network now than it was when we chatted with y'all 6 months ago.
Yeah, certainly. It is obviously presenting much more of a challenge now. So it's time to get a little more creative about networking, because it is critical to any well put together job search. So if you already have a strong professional network, now is the time to take advantage of it. Reach out to people in your network, let them know you're looking for a new job. Send them your current resume so they have it on hand to circulate to anyone in their networks who may be looking to hire somebody with your skill set. And if you've lost touch with your network through the day-to-day like busyness of life, it's not a big deal. It's a great time to reach back out and invite them to reconnect. Normally, we would recommend extending an invitation for like an in-person coffee or a lunch. But obviously with social distancing measures in place, that's not really happening. We have been suggesting people, schedule virtual happy hours or coffees. And in fact, we've actually been doing that a lot more as a team, and I've been doing that a lot more individually since this all started. And I've actually been amazed by the difference in connecting via video conference versus a call. I feel like it's much more personal. You can see people's facial expressions and when they're smiling, although some people say you can hear a smile. I think it's nice to see one. and you can see people in their personal surroundings. So I think that's been a great substitute for the in-person connection. And I think people are craving a little bit of that right now. So it's a great time to reconnect, even if it's just to check in and see how someone's doing. So if you already have built your if you have not already built your network, it's not too late to get started now. Even though you can't be out and about meeting people, you can still put together a plan so that when social distancing becomes unnecessary, you're ready to get out there and start meeting people and seeking out speaking engagements and volunteer opportunities to help you expand your network. Now is a really good time to start thinking about organizations you'd like to get involved with to help build your network. You can consider professional and industry associations. School and law firm alumni groups are great organizations to get involved with, and also charitable organizations. And once you identify those organizations, make sure to get added to their email list so that you can keep an eye out for volunteer opportunities, including opportunities to speak at events and webinars. They're a great way to get your name out there and build some contacts as well. So with regard to some of the larger professional organizations, sometimes it's easier to get involved with a smaller subset first. And I recommend that you look into the local chapters of larger organizations, as well as committees and subcommittees that are most relevant to your line of work. Again, sign up for their mailing list. You should get informed of meetings and events. And, even if it's just virtual events right now, it's helpful because members of the leadership team for those committees and chapters will get used to seeing your name. You'll be able to learn about their organization and how they operate and what opportunities might be available for you to utilize for future networking events. One note of caution while you're doing this, especially if you're in transition right now and find yourself with more free time than usual, do be mindful of not overcommitting. You might feel like you have all the free time in the world right now, but that will change at some point, and you really don't want to risk overcommitting and then being unable to honor your commitments once you do find a full-time role, because that can definitely be detrimental to your professional reputation. So for this reason, it's important to be also selective and targeted where you commit your volunteer time. So I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly so she can talk to you a little bit more about how you should divide up your time with your job search.
Yes. In normal times, we recommend that anyone searching for a new job should spend 80% of the time they have available for their search on in-person networking. But that's obviously not feasible right now, so we've had to change our recommendation for the time being to focus on things that you can do from your home while social distancing. And we have two charts up on our PowerPoint slide. The one on the left shows a recommendation that Lisa and I had made in October of 2019 at an ACC deep dive luncheon, where we talked about allocation of job search time. And the slide on the right for comparison is our recommendation today. In October of 2019, which was just 6 short months ago, we recommended that candidates spend 80% of their time on in-person networking, 10% on working with recruiters, and the remaining 10% on online networking. But we've obviously had to drastically change this allocation since the 80% of the time is no longer feasible. With our new chart, we still recommend that you focus just 10% of your time working with recruiters. And then we recommend 40% of your job search time be spent on planning and preparing for future in-person networking opportunities for time when social distancing, fortunately, will no longer be necessary. And that includes some of the activities that Lisa had talked about earlier to get yourself set up for speaking engagements, volunteer opportunities, and event hosting. And then right now, the remaining 50% of your time will be available for online networking. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can go about online networking. And one great option right now is to write articles. That's something you can do from your home while remaining socially distant. And on LinkedIn, it's extremely easy to self-publish articles. If you're not sure where to start with that, I would say start by thinking about which of your areas of expertise would be the most beneficial to the network you have built or the network that you're in the process of building, and then just get to writing. And once your articles are complete and you've self-published them on LinkedIn, you can then circulate them to your contacts via email and also other social media sources as well. Hopefully, once you do that, you'll start getting likes and shares and complimentary comments on your articles. And when you do, it can certainly be helpful to reach out to the people who gave you those kudos and maybe offer to lead webinars on those topics about which you wrote for the organizations. For instance, if someone writes a comment on your LinkedIn article and says, oh, hey, this is very helpful, I'm going to share this with my colleagues, consider offering to lead a webinar for their colleagues to go into more depth on that topic. Webinars are a great way to further get your name out right now. It's a way to showcase your skills and your expertise while still socially distancing at home. And also right now, a lot of people have a lot more time available than normal to attend webinars, so you're likely to get a greater attendance. And also, I would say right now there are a lot of organizations that are eager to find ways to remain connected with their members while in-person events are on hold. So a lot of these organizations might be very eager to take you up on your offer to speak at a webinar. And a little bit later in the conversation, we are going to talk a little bit more about how you can utilize social media more for networking. But before doing that, we're going to turn the discussion back to Lisa to talk about evaluating the available opportunities to decide which of them you would like to pursue.
Yeah, and on this note, you should be selective, but not overly selective about the opportunities you pursue. You do want to be mindful of not wasting your goodwill that you've built with your network by pursuing opportunities that are an obvious mismatch. But along those lines, I think that it's fair to say, please don't wait until you meet 100% of the criteria listed in a job description to pursue an opportunity. We see this all the time. Most job descriptions are more idealistic than realistic, and employers typically know that they won't find a candidate who meets 100% of the criteria. And particularly now, as the job market becomes much softer, I fully expect that we'll see some of what we refer to in the industry as the purple squirrel postings, that is just everything in the kitchen sink as far as the skill set. So, do be mindful of that. I think the good recommendation is if you meet 60 to 70% of the job description criteria, it is well worth it to apply. And when you apply in your cover letter, which is a topic Kimberly is going to cover later for us, we recommend that you highlight the areas where your experience best aligns with the job description. And assuming that you are fortunate and get an interview, please don't exaggerate your experience in that particular area while self-promoting. Advocate for yourself truthfully, but truly honesty is the best policy here. And if you're asked about an area of experience that you do not have, it's really best to be upfront about it rather than skirting the question, and try to pivot or analogize to a similar situation that you've handled at work or a transferable skill set that will allow you to handle the work at hand or get up to speed quickly. If you say, oh, yeah, I've just done that, a skilled interviewer or recruiter will be able to ask you the right questions to realize that you haven't. And then in that case, you'll just end up losing credibility about the other topics that you are discussing. So at that note, I think I'll turn it over to Kimberly to discuss how to write an influential cover letter.
Yes. So in addition to spending time working on your resume right now, I do also recommend spending some time thinking about cover letters. Though I say this realizing that nobody likes to write cover letters. I never liked to write them personally when I was looking for a job, but I did, because I do think they can provide a great opportunity to showcase your fit for the particular job you're applying for. They can also give you an opportunity to address anything else that's unique to your qualifications for the position, but that might not be obvious from your resume. Some of the other benefits of cover letters are that you can use them to explain things like a gap in your employment history, or to explain why you're looking to leave your current position. You can reference a networking connection in a cover letter and also proactively address any potential concerns that the employer might have about your resume. It's also an opportunity to demonstrate that you have spent the time researching the role that you're applying for in the company, and a great way to showcase your writing skills and your ability to draft a professional letter. But I will say, when it comes to cover letters, I recommend you keep them short. In most cases, there should not be a reason for a cover letter to be more than 1 page long. It's going to be reviewed by someone who's digging through a large stack of resumes and cover letters, and I think they will appreciate the concise communications. Also, the longer it is, the greater the chance an inadvertent typographical error could show up. On that note, I always recommend you proofread your cover letters. And then once you proofread them again. And then have 2 or 3 family members proofread them for you. But if you truly don't have the time to proofread them and make sure that they're free from typographical and other errors, then I would say it's probably better not to send one at all, because I do think a cover letter with a typo is worse than no cover letter at all. And similarly, I would say if you have the time, avoid using generic cover letters. I feel like nothing showcases a lack of a genuine interest in a position more than a generic cover letter. The ones that start off, "Dear recruiter, I am an excellent attorney and was very excited by your posting and can be a great asset to your organization." Those cover letters scream to me that that same exact cover letter went out to potentially dozens or hundreds of other employers. So again, if you truly just don't have the time to write a cover letter that's specifically tailored to the opportunity at hand, I would say it's best not to write one at all. And I know sometimes when you're submitting online job applications, logistically, it can be tricky to submit a cover letter, because often the web page only gives you that opportunity to upload one resume. So in that case, you can always just combine the cover letter and the resume into one single document, either a PDF or Word document, depending on what the web page will accept, and then just upload them both together as one document. And just as a quick final note on cover letters, I know a lot of candidates are definitely reluctant to invest the time it takes to write a good cover letter because they feel like nobody's ever going to read them. And I get that. And it's certainly possible they won't get read. But personally, I've definitely seen on more than one occasion where a good, well-written, influential cover letter made the difference in a candidate getting an opportunity to interview. So I feel like when you're applying for your dream job, that it's definitely worthwhile to take the time to draft a proper cover letter. And now Lisa's going to talk a little bit about some of our resume best practices.
Yeah, and before we move on to that topic, we've got a great question here about how do you recommend conducting yourself in an online interview? I do not think that regular interviews are being held right now. And of course, that's the whole goal of everything that we're talking to you about today, is to get you in a position where you will end up landing that interview. And how is that process changing right now? I personally have observed many of our clients are just going to online video format through Teams or whatever video conferencing service that they're using right now. And I know Kimberly's done some research about this, but just some general comments here. You should prepare for that interview the same way you would prepare for any other. Thoroughly research the company, know where your skills and attributes are going to provide the most impact in the business organization. And, remember to show up with enthusiasm, ready to sell yourself for the role. I was very surprised a couple weeks ago. I was working with a organization here who was attempting to hire an in-house lawyer, and it just fell a little flat because the candidate didn't present with the same the kind of enthusiasm about the role that he would have liked to see. I think there are some practical tips too. Make sure that you've got, a nice quiet space at your house, and you try to minimize distractions. You don't get thrown off your game by the landscaping crew, showing up outside, or your dog barking. Try to minimize all of those things that you can control in advance. Now, obviously, we can't control everything. If let's say power happens to go out, I mean, these things can happen, and people are certainly understanding of the times and are allotting people more grace. But I'll turn that over to Kimberly now to address anything else that she'd like to add.
Yes, and one thing just in the interest of time is I did write an article a few years ago on the topic of video conferencing etiquette that was really specifically geared towards video interviews. And that's on my LinkedIn page. So please feel free to check that out. It has suggestions about things like what to wear and how to position the camera and that sort of thing. So if you go to my LinkedIn page under articles, you should find that. I think I published it sometime in 2017, so you might have to scroll down a little bit. The other thing I would say, I just yesterday afternoon sat on a panel of recruiters that recorded a video podcast specifically on the topic of virtual hiring. And one thing that all the panelists really agreed on is that some of those intangible skills in candidates that are hard to address in person, things like leadership skills, general demeanor, how is someone going to work with others, those are even harder to assess in a video interview. So I think, and my fellow panelists did as well, that references are going to become even more important as candidates are being interviewed via video more. So I would say definitely put more thought into your references and what things they're going to say about you. For instance, if you're working at a company where they have this great company culture and working well with others is huge, let your references know that the employer, if they contact them, that this reference, it would be great for them to talk about those things. Those intangible skills, we all think that without the opportunity to, as we're calling it, share a meal with a candidate before hiring them, a lot of people are going to be reliant much more on references or also on referrals to assess those intangibles. So I would say that make sure that you're even more selective than normal about references, and maybe let those references know the types of areas that you think would be most important for them to discuss when they're contacted by the company.
All right, so we're going to move on to resume best practices. And, I think most of you all are pretty well aware of some of these tips that we're going to share. So we'll try to keep it brief. And just overall, I think that we have put together some samples that we think are well done and some examples that we think are poorly done. And we're not going to share them in the interest of time on this webinar, but if you're interested in seeing some of those samples, feel free to follow up with us post webinar. We'd be happy to send them to you. Okay, so really, the thing to keep in mind about a resume is that it really should just be like a highlight reel of your career. You're going to want to highlight your experience with the things that are important to your target employer. And one thing that's important to all organizations is money. So be sure to highlight any skills or projects that you've worked on that will help generate revenue for a particular employer, or conversely, those projects that you've been involved with that have created efficiencies and saved your organization's tangible amounts of money. Numbers and figures and data are of much interest to potential employers. So try to deduce those things into bullet points on your resume. Sometimes with resumes, less is more. The longer your career has been, I think the temptation is to try to throw everything that you've ever accomplished onto your resume. But when people see resumes that are longer than 3 pages, they oftentimes just lose focus. Again, the primary purpose of your resume is to get the attention of the reviewer so that you'll be able to get an interview. So again, it should just be like a highlight reel, and it's not a place to recite everything you've ever done in your career. You're also going to want to be mindful of space allocation on your resume. The rule of thumb is to allocate the most space jobs you've held most recently and for the longest amount of time. Minimize space devoted to irrelevant or distant work experience. And surprisingly, we often see resumes that don't include complete contact information. At the very least, you're going to want to include your city and your state, your phone number, and your email address so that the person reviewing it knows where you reside and how to contact you. And do not use functional resumes. And for those of you who don't know what a functional resume is, it is a document that just lists all of your work experience, and then it lists all of your employment separately. So you don't know what skill set you developed where and when. People prefer to see non-functional resumes. And also, don't try to get too creative with fonts and use scripted fonts or complete sentences. Scripted fonts can be very difficult to read, especially for people who are reading multiple resumes hours after hours every day. And the harder your resume is to read, the more likely that something important might get lost. Complete sentences also take up much more space than bullet points and can make your resume look a lot more crowded. So please keep in mind to use bullet points and phrases as you're crafting your resume. They're much easier to read, and they actually are much more impactful in terms of things that you want to highlight. Oftentimes we also will see resumes with photos of the candidates attached, and we advise strongly against doing that. It just doesn't really look professional in any context. And if you do decide to provide some personal information in a sort of hobby section, just keep it brief. It doesn't need to be a recitation of every interest and hobby that you have. And then finally, make sure that there is white space on the page. Look at your resume from a distance and make sure the pages aren't completely covered in writing. It really just has the impact of obscuring the important information that you want people to be able to glean quickly. And again, we have some examples of resumes that we like and are impactful. If you would like to have us share any of those with you, please feel free to reach back out.
And so our next topic is on working with recruiting firms. And I always recommend candidates who are actively searching for a job reach out to multiple different recruiting firms. We certainly want to work with all of you, but we realize that that's not going to happen and that that's not in your best interest. I think recruiters are likely to be able to provide some useful tips. And so the more recruiters you speak with, the more likely you are to get information about your local market, the key desires of the local law firms and corporate legal departments. And also it's important to get your resume to as many search firms as possible, because often there's only 1 or 2 recruiting firms that are going to work on any given opportunity. Lawyers often want to have one recruiter contact who will let them know about every opening in their city that relates to their specialty area. But unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. in reality, most law firms and companies that are looking to hire lawyers are only going to work with at most a few different recruiters. So it's only going to be those recruiters who are going to know about the details of each opportunity and be in a position to submit candidates for it. So I think the more firms that have your resume on file, the more likely you're going to be to hear about opportunities that are of interest to you. But also don't assume that once you've spoken to a recruiter that they're going to proactively reach out to you and let you know about every opportunity they're working on. We try our best to do that, but often things move very quickly once recruiters get involved. So I do think it's best if you keep an eye out on the job posting yourself and you let your recruiters know if you see something that's posted on their firm's website that you think is a fit for you. And when you do so, certainly be sure to sell yourself to recruiters, but be mindful of the process when you do so. There have certainly been many occasions where I looked at a candidate's resume and my first thought was that that candidate was probably not the best fit for the role, but then the candidate changed my mind, either in an email or a conversation. They convinced me that they were great for the role. And I love when I get that kind of input from candidates. I'm always glad to find another strong candidate for a search and someone who's confident enough and comfortable selling themselves. But there are other times where the candidate makes their case to me and I hear it, but I still don't feel like they're a great fit for a role. But they then tell me that I should just go ahead and submit their resume anyway. But unfortunately, that's just not something I'm going to be in a position to do, because that's just not how our process in the industry works. So just keep that in mind as well. And our next topic is going to be about online resources. I know, again, from my personal experience with my own job search, that the process of applying for jobs online is frustrating. I know what it feels like when you apply for a job that you're perfect for, or maybe even overqualified for, and you just don't hear anything back. I know it feels like your resume often goes into a black hole. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And even though that's a frustrating reality of today's job search environment, I still recommend that you do make online job applications a part of your regular search process. And believe it or not, I actually do know a number of lawyers who found their dream jobs that way, including law firm partners who were trying for years to get in-house and got their first in-house job by applying online. I think during tough economic times, online job applications are more important than ever, with companies potentially trying to save costs by avoiding paying a recruiter and instead trying to hire on your own. And as part of that online job search process, I definitely recommend that you sign up for job alerts from websites like Indeed, because that will allow you to get timely notification when there's a new job posted that meets your search criteria. And I always think with new postings that candidates who apply earliest might have that advantage by getting their application in early. And then once you've submitted your online application, I definitely recommend you then go back and check your LinkedIn contacts and your personal contacts list to see if you have connections at the company that's doing the hiring, because then in addition to going through that online process, you can also have your contacts at the company pass along your resume to the person who is in charge of the hiring, just to make sure that it does get in the right hands. I wouldn't use a personal connection to circumvent an established process, but I do think it's a great supplement when you have that opportunity to do so. And now our next topic is to work on developing your personal brand. And we're starting with this great New York Times cartoon. I think those of you who were at our deep dive presentation in October may have seen this. It's a cartoon of a lawyer getting ready for an interview. And in the text, the lawyer is getting asked the question, what do you do? And like many of us, we have trouble sometimes describing what we do. So this lawyer responds, I'm a lawyer, the law, I do law, I practice law, I'm an attorney, something legal. And I think there is some truth in that side for all of us who have that tendency to struggle a bit with explaining what we do to others. So in our next section, we're going to address some of the ways that you can come up with a statement to articulate what you do as a lawyer so that you can help sell yourself and your personal brand in the best way possible. So Lisa's going to talk us through a little bit about how you can work on developing your personal brand.
Yeah, and arguably, personal brand is more important now than ever because you are not able to engage in in-person interactions at events or interviews. So your personal reputation may even carry more weight as you're seeking out new opportunities than it would in normal times. For those of you who are not familiar with the concept of personal branding, your personal brand is your reputation. So from a career standpoint, your personal brand is your professional reputation in your legal community. If you haven't already built your personal brand, now is a great time to get started. But before you begin to build and express your brand, you first need to figure out what it is. And that requires you to know who you are and what you're good at, what you're known for, and what your reputation is in your professional community. I see this as a 5-step process, which we'll be talking through. So starting on your personal brand, the first step is self-evaluation. Ask yourself questions such as, what are your strengths and your areas for improvement? What do you enjoy doing most in your career? What do you want to be known for? Which of your attributes are most useful to your target audience? The second step is to choose to solicit input from others. Ask people who you trust in your network, to former supervisors, colleagues, direct reports. Ask them about what they view as your strengths and weaknesses. Encourage them to be honest with you. The third step is to reflect on the information that you've learned. Figure out what you're good at and come up with your description on your statement of your personal brand. Focus on the things you both enjoy and are also good at, because those are the areas which you will truly shine in. Also give some thoughts to what traits will be most appreciated by your target audience and focus on those as well. Now the fourth step is creating an elevator pitch so you don't fumble around like our New York Times interviewee. This is essentially the pitch that you would give to sell yourself in the time of an elevator ride in about 30 seconds. So imagine that you're walking into a job interview or a client pitch, and while you're in the building's lobby, you happen to run into the company's GC or CEO, and it comes up in casual conversation that you're at the company to interview for a job or to pitch for some work that day. Imagine that as you walk to the elevator, the GC or CEO steps inside the elevator with you and says, "Tell me about yourself," while pushing the button to the 40th floor. Your elevator pitch is what you would say in the time that it takes to go from the lobby to the 40th floor of the building. So when you're putting together your elevator pitch, I recommend that you be specific. Doing law is not specific because the more narrow and focused your branding statement is, the more likely people are going to remember who you are and what you do. I also recommend that you focus on things that actually set you apart from others so that your branding statement doesn't get lost in the shuffle. Also, be authentic. It will be easier to sell yourself if you truly believe in what you're saying. And of course, the fifth step is to get the message out. And this is the process of building awareness of your personal brand, which Kimberly is going to speak with you about next.
Yes. And building awareness of your brand is certainly a little bit more difficult to do right now with social distancing, but there are still a lot of tools I see out there that can help you get started. And the first thing we always recommend is that you focus on building goodwill with people and organizations that are already in your network. So if you're not active on LinkedIn, I definitely recommend you start using it regularly. And one thing we talked about earlier is just liking and sharing and commenting on posts to remind people about your areas of expertise. But another great benefit of that is that the people whose posts that you're liking and sharing and commenting on are going to probably appreciate the free publicity that they're getting when you share their information. So that will help you build goodwill with them. And at the same time, continuing to publish and share your own material is going to continue to remind your network of your specialty. Another great way you can use LinkedIn to find opportunities to help other people, which of course is important because networking is a two-way street, is, if you see an article on LinkedIn and you think it might be helpful to one of your contacts, you can send it along to them. If you see a recruiter or a company that's posting a job opening on LinkedIn and it's not a fit for you, consider passing the information along to someone else in your network who might be interested. Or reach out to the recruiter or the company that's doing the hiring and provide them with some referrals for some potential candidates. Because I do think that when you help other people to find a job, or you help companies to hire a good employee, they're going to be inclined to remember that, and they're going to want to return the favor when they're able to do so. And just also generally speaking, when you do things to help others, they're just going to be more inclined to make an effort to want to help you when they're in a position to do so. One thing you can do along those lines is reach out to organizations you're involved with and offer to write articles or give webinars on your area of expertise for their members. A lot of professional organizations publish newsletters or magazines regularly, and a lot of them are very happy to find members who are willing to contribute content. And as we mentioned earlier, a lot of organizations are also looking for ways to stay connected with their members, so are likely to appreciate you offering to conduct a webinar for them. And I think once we return to a more normal state of affairs, at that point, of course, you can begin to rely more on in-person events to help build your network and get the word out about your brand. But if you start now with focusing on your online brand, it can get you off to a good start. And once you've built your brand, make sure you're always keeping that momentum going, even during this time, which is important for a number of reasons. You never know when an unexpected opportunity might come up for you to pitch for a new client or a promotion, so you want to be prepared for that. Unfortunately, we never know when an organization might need to downsize and is going to be evaluating employees to determine where to reduce headcount. Or there could be an unexpected resignation that leaves an opening for a promotion, and you don't want to be the only one amongst your colleagues who isn't prepared to self-promote at that first opportunity to do so. I know this all takes a lot of time. Building and maintaining the brand you want to have takes a lot of time and effort, but I like to compare that to putting money away into a savings account for a rainy day, because eventually you will have time to cash out. And so now our next topic is going to be conducting an audit of your personal brand.
And this gentleman's face is exactly what you don't want your reaction to be when you Google yourself to audit your personal brand. It's certainly a helpful tool, Google, for personal branding. But when you Google yourself, you will see the information that others are likely to see if they're interested in finding out more about you. I think this is especially important to do before a job interview, because it has become more and more common for companies to conduct Google searches of candidates prior to interviews. You'd be amazed what you might find on the first 2 pages that pop up after your Google, after you Google your own name. Maybe an outdated and perhaps less than ideal profile picture on social media, on a site that you joined years ago and then forgot about, or maybe an article that you wrote several years ago on a topic that is no longer relevant to the focus of your current professional life, or your current branding statement, or perhaps you'll see some posts and photos from a social media account that you thought you had made private. We recommend you engage in this type of personal brand self-audit at least twice a year to be sure that what is reflected about you online is what you want members of your professional community to see when they search for information about you. If it's not what you'd like to see, there are a couple ways that you can address this. Sometimes it's just simplest. If you can control the content you want to remove, just remove it. There are instances where you won't be able to control that, and if you can't, work on getting your name out with more recent activity, as Google will often place and rank newer activity higher in its search results. So there's another great reason to work on publishing articles and getting your name associated with webinar invitations and other organizations, because the greater your online presence, the more older activity will take a back seat to what you've done more recently. And just a final takeaway on that topic. Nowadays, companies that run background checks on new employees are becoming more and more inclined to include a social media check as part of their standard background process. So why don't we keep that in mind as we head into our discussion of the proper use and function of social media in your job search.
Yes, and I know we all have the understanding that LinkedIn is typically used for professional connections, and sites like Facebook and Instagram are more frequently used for social interaction. But most of us do have some overlap with our professional and our personal networks. So a lot of members of our professional community are connected with us on sites like Facebook and Instagram. So of course, keep in mind what you post to those more social sites can still be contributing to your personal brand in your professional community. And that also holds true for posts in which your friends tag you. If you're tagged by a friend who has connections in your professional network, those connections might see your friend's post, as will your own connections. So in addition to being mindful of what you post, also be mindful of the posts that you're tagged in. When it comes to LinkedIn, I've noticed that most attorneys do have a LinkedIn profile, but many don't take advantage of all the ways that LinkedIn can really help to promote their brand and advance their career. So we've got a few tips to ensure you're making the best use of your LinkedIn account. First, of course, make sure to note that you are open to new opportunities. LinkedIn gives you the option to check a box on your profile to note you're open to new opportunities. And that's something that recruiters will often use as a filter when they're searching for candidates, and may only reach out to lawyers who have that designation. Also, I would recommend using a professional headshot. If you can't get one taken, the next best thing is to use a high quality camera and have someone take a photo of you from the shoulders up, standing in front of a blank wall while you're dressed in professional clothing. If that's not an option, just do the best you can to mimic that look. But please don't use a photo of you holding your dog or dressed in casual clothing on LinkedIn. I think it's better to not have a photo at all than to have a casual photo. And also, because recruiters use LinkedIn when searching for candidates, having details about your employment history is helpful, particularly if you are open to new opportunities. I'm always amazed when I search LinkedIn and find the majority of candidate profiles I come across list nothing more than the candidate's employer names, job titles, and dates of employment in the bio section. I always recommend that your LinkedIn profile mirror your resume in terms of the level of detail you provide about all your roles. And remember that lawyers are going to use keyword searches when searching LinkedIn. So of course, be sure in your profile that you include multiple reference to all the buzzwords that are key in your specialty area. And as we discussed earlier, it's always helpful if you like and share posts by others in your network, since they're more likely then to do the same for you. But please be selective. Don't be that person who takes up half of someone's LinkedIn feed with multiple posts and reposts and shares. And don't just share or post for the sake of putting something out there. I think it's better to be selective and strategic in what you post and to focus on the things that relate to your areas of expertise and that are most likely to be relevant and interesting to your target audience. Basically, I can sum it up by saying, keep in mind on social media, you want to portray yourself as a thought leader, not as a spammer. And with the prevalence of oversharing on social media now, my own personal position is, when in doubt, I would say leave it out. And just going back to something we touched on earlier about how easy it is to self-publish articles on LinkedIn right now, if you're in a position where you have the time to write, I definitely recommend doing so. But keep in mind that you don't need to publish everything you write immediately. For me, when I find myself with extra time to write, I'll draft several articles at once, but I won't publish them all right away. I'll maybe wait and publish one every couple of months so that I can spread out the time when I'm able to communicate with my network and remind people about my brand. But when you do that, please make sure that you do reread your material before you post it. You just want to make sure that something you wrote 6 months ago isn't something outdated or that's otherwise not ideal to post when you're ready to do so. And our second to last topic, because I see we're coming up close to an hour, but we do just have a couple topics left. And the next one is going to be on the benefit of seeking out pro bono opportunities right now, which Lisa will talk about.
Yeah, and I'll just hit on this really quickly. I mean, if you find yourself in the unfortunate situation of being unemployed, we do recommend, as we've mentioned previously, that you take advantage of some of your newfound free time to engage in pro bono work. It's a great way to expand your network and do something meaningful with your time while you have more of it. There are many organizations that provide licensed attorneys with opportunities to do pro bono work, including some that provide malpractice insurance and the administrative support to cover the work that you do through them. There are also organizations that focus on providing pro bono opportunities for transactional lawyers and in-house counsel. One example is the Atlanta Pro Bono Partnership, which provides opportunities for lawyers to do transactional legal work for nonprofit entities. So I know we get a lot of, oh, well, you have to be a litigator to help with the pro bono, but you do not. There are plenty of other ways to volunteer for a good cause. In addition to helping expand your network, it also helps keep your legal skills sharp. On the note of volunteering with pro bono organizations, I was working with a client about a year ago, and they were looking to hire a corporate and M&A lawyer for their group. And they had gotten something over like 250 applications and resumes for the role. And the hiring manager was relating to me that she had a stack of resumes on her desk, and one of her legal department colleagues came into her office and noticed a gentleman's resume in the pile and said, oh gosh, he's applied for this role. I used to work with him probably 4 years ago. We were on a 501c3 committee together. He's absolutely fantastic. And as a result of that just chance encounter, his resume rose to the top, and he is now their new corporate and M&A lawyer. So these are sort of real life examples of the advice that we're giving you working. And then just real quickly to touch on one of the other things that we wanted to talk to you about today, stay flexible in your job search. Apart from having a full-time job, there are many other ways to stay gainfully employed. You can also consider doing contract work while you search for a permanent position. There are now many legal services companies like Legility that offer seasoned lawyers the opportunity to do high-level and sophisticated legal work on a contract basis. And some, even like us, provide health insurance. And as an added bonus, many contract opportunities offer flexibility in working arrangements. So you may be able to continue uninterrupted with your job search while keeping your skills sharp and earning some money. So for example, Legility, we have over, I'd say 450 lawyers working with our company right now. Over 190 working for corporate legal departments and law firms and substantive long-term engagements. And we have over 60 lawyers working here in the Atlanta area. So it's definitely a great time to explore doing that type of work. And I've also found that at times, lawyers who are in transition, who do contract work, decide they actually really enjoy the lifestyle and flexibility that it provides. So they may even decide to return to a permanent role once they decide to explore the So on that note, we just wanted to thank you all for taking the time to be with us today. And I see that we have a couple of questions that have come in that we have, I hope, a few minutes to address. So let me scroll through.
Yeah, so the first one I saw, oh, go ahead.
The first one I saw is, aren't chronological resumes an invitation to age discrimination? So my answer to that is, if you have been employed in the legal profession for a very long time, the general rule of thumb, and Kimberly, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that you really don't need to provide every single job that you've ever held. A good rule of thumb is that your resume can go back 20 years and you do not need to put the dates that you graduated from law school or high school or college on your resume. And, you know, it also sort of weaves back into that advice that we gave about devoting the right space allocation to more recent positions.
And I also think in this day and age, definitely employers are cognizant of that and are focusing more on level of experience rather than age. A lot of us who were more traditional law students and graduated sometime around the ages of 25, 26, 27, sometimes forget that there are plenty of folks who didn't graduate from law school until they were 40 or later, and it was their second career. So instead of, I think, looking at that as just in terms of age, I think it's more of a focus of showing the amount of experience that you have.
Okay, are there any LinkedIn thought leaders or recruiting firms we should be following to find good content to share?
So my personal approach to that has always just been, as I develop new connections and new LinkedIn contacts, I look at what they're sharing, I look at their articles, and there are definitely people out there who I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And I have found just from following what they post over many months or years that they're more likely to post stuff that is stuff I want to reshare. And so when I'm looking for a reason to be active on LinkedIn and network, I feel like I haven't posted anything for a while, rather than scroll through pages and pages of feed, I might actually go directly to their profile and say, okay, you know, I know that Joe Smith publishes great articles that are completely relevant to my network. What has Joe Smith shared in the last 6 months? Can I find something in there? So I would say my take is just figuring out for your particular situation and your particular industry, who is out there that you respect that is very active on social media, and maybe figure out a dozen or so folks and focus on what they're sharing.
And yeah, and I have to say, I would encourage all of you all to follow us. We are constantly in the process of planning content-rich webinars. As Kimberly mentioned, she's authored a host of articles on a variety of topics that would be of interest to all of you. So I think we're a great, we're a great organization to follow us. We are keeping your interests in mind as we go about these efforts, and are hoping to share a lot of content-rich information. Okay, so I think we have time for one last question. And this is, for a period of time, I kept key details off my LinkedIn profile because I was concerned that it would be a media story against my company. The higher my level, the more this has been a problem. This info is useful to recruiters and other lawyers, but it would be bad fodder for media. Ideas on how to handle.
I mean, obviously, as lawyers, attorney-client privilege and confidentiality need to be first and foremost above everything. And that's something that Lisa and I have touched on a little bit in other presentations we've given, where I will be interviewing someone and I'll have to cut them off because they'll start telling me about some government investigation they worked on where their company was being investigated by XYZ entity. And I said, wait, stop, there's no privilege here. So certainly that's something to be mindful of. If it's something particularly sensitive, if in doubt, you definitely just need to leave it out. I would just focus on figuring out how you can discuss it without revealing any confidential information. And that's something I advise people on, even on interview prep, is if you've got a great example of work that you've done, but you just can't describe it in an interview without revealing confidential information, then the answer is you can't. But if you can be more generic about it, or there's some way that you can just sort of describe what you did, but without getting into any details. One thing to consider is if you've worked a number of different places, or if it happened when you were at a law firm with a number of different clients, putting it up in the executive summary section rather than under the section of any single employer. But I think we all have to be mindful of our privilege and confidentiality obligations first and foremost.
Well, I do not see any more questions from our audience. We want to thank you for hanging in there with us today and being attentive. We have really enjoyed this opportunity to address you all virtually and invite any of you that have additional questions to follow up with us directly. Thank you and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.